The Old Testament book of Deuteronomy is remembered as the fifth book of Moses. Its name comes from the Greek meaning second law, and while Deuteronomy is a kind of retelling of the Mosaic Law, it's not an exact copy. It's better understood as an explanation of the Mosaic Law to a new generation of Israelites about to enter the Promised Land. The author is focused on how the law should be applied once Israel is established and living in the land. While Deuteronomy presents itself as a series of speeches given by an aged Moses to this next generation, the general scholarly consensus is that it is a book compiled much later, around 622 BC, during the religious reforms of King Josiah. In this view, the theology of Deuteronomy is pitted against the earlier biblical books. It's claimed that it represents a radically different view of God. It is true that Deuteronomy emphasizes a more socially practical version of the law. For example, in its emphasis on protecting widows, orphans, and foreigners in the land. But this is also what one would expect if the law was moving from theoretical application in the wilderness into a settled city life post-conquest. It's widely accepted that later editing must have been done to the original text. There are references that require time to have passed since the actual events. There are third-person mentions of Moses and the account of his death in chapter 34. Interestingly, if Deuteronomy was used consistently in public ceremonies, as was in fact commanded in chapter 31, this would explain why later amendments were introduced. It's been discovered that the book as a whole mimics the literary structure of a Hittite vassal treaty. These treaties were made between a conquering king and his newly conquered people. This choice of structure says a lot about what the author was intending to communicate to the Israelites about God as their king. The structure also highlights the monotheistic bent of Israel. When witnesses are called, rather than the pagan version of calling other gods and goddesses, Deuteronomy calls the heavens and the earth themselves to testify against Israel. The vassal treaty structure may also provide some evidence for an earlier date of composition. The structure itself has an earlier and later form. Deuteronomy follows the decidedly earlier form structure that dates to the second millennium BC.